The day always began the same way for this young person. With a tired mind and a heavy feeling that rested on their shoulders even before their feet touched the floor, the alarm rang again and again, each time cutting through whatever light sleep they managed to get. Most mornings, they sat on the edge of the bed, trying to gather the energy to stand up. It felt like a small battle every single day. They often wondered why even simple things seemed so hard now. They lived in a small apartment close to a busy street. Cars passed by from early morning until late night, and the noise never really stopped. Even when the windows were closed, the sound of engines and horns slipped through. It wasn't the worst place to live, but it wasn't peaceful either. Sometimes they longed for silence the way some people long for fresh air. But silence was rare, and so they learned to keep moving. Even when their mind wanted a break, work added another layer of stress. The office felt fast, loud, and demanding. Every day brought new tasks, new calls, new deadlines. They tried their best to keep up, but the pace never slowed down long enough for them to breathe. Their coworkers seemed to adjust better, laughing during breaks, chatting about weekend plans, and keeping a balance that seemed almost impossible to them. They often wondered how everyone else handled life so effortlessly. Maybe they were pretending. Maybe everyone carried more than they showed. They didn't know for sure, but they did know that their own stress was becoming harder to hide. By the time they reached home in the evenings, their mind felt full and messy. There were thoughts they didn't want to think, worries they couldn't let go of, and long stretches of silence inside that didn't feel peaceful at all. It felt like their thoughts were piled on top of each other, leaving no room to rest. Nights were the hardest. They wanted sleep, but sleep didn't always come. They would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wishing their mind would calm down. But it didn't. Not easily. One night, after another long day that left them feeling drained, they sat on the couch with their phone in hand. They scrolled through random videos, not really paying attention to any of them. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of the screen. Their body was tired, but their mind was still running fast. They wanted something to help quiet the noise, something gentle, something that didn't demand their attention. That's when they came across a simple thumbnail that showed a peaceful landscape with the words relaxing classical music. At first, they didn't think much of it. Classical music wasn't something they listened to often. They had heard pieces here and there in movies or stores, but it wasn't part of their life. Still, the title made them pause. They stared at it for a moment, then tapped on it without expecting anything special. They just wanted something soft to fill the room while they tried to loosen their thoughts. The video started with a calm piano melody. The first notes were gentle, almost shy, as if they were slowly entering the quiet space of the room. They let the sound wash over them without thinking. The notes filled the air like warm light. Something inside them softened for the first time that day. They didn't know why it felt different, but it did. They sank deeper into the couch, letting their back rest more comfortably. Their eyes slowly closed, and their breathing began to slow down without them trying. The melody moved in a simple way, rising and falling with ease, as if it was guiding their mind into a softer place. The room didn't feel so heavy anymore as the music played. Memories they forgot began to surface, not painful ones, but simple, gentle ones. They remembered a time when mornings meant sunlight coming through the window before responsibilities grew heavy. They remembered sitting by a small stream during a family trip many years ago, listening to the water as it moved over rocks. They remembered moments when silence didn't feel frightening but comforting. These memories came to them in the way soft waves reached the shore, quiet and steady. Their shoulders relaxed a little. Their heartbeat settled. For a few minutes, they didn't think about work, deadlines, or the long list of worries that usually occupied their nights. They were simply there, listening. The change was small, but real. It was the first time in weeks that they felt a sense of calm that wasn't forced. They stayed like that for a long time, letting the music continue its steady rhythm. It didn't try to impress. It didn't try to be loud or dramatic. It was just there, offering peace in a gentle and honest way. It was enough. After the playlist ended, the room felt different. It wasn't silent, but it wasn't tense either. They opened their eyes slowly and looked around, feeling a softness they hadn't felt all day. Maybe it was the music. Maybe it was the moment. But something inside them had shifted, even if only slightly. It felt like a small door had opened, a door to something calmer, something they didn't know they needed. They checked the playlist again, clicked the save icon, and set it aside. At that moment, they didn't know that this simple action would become the first step of a quiet journey. They didn't know that this soft discovery would grow into a habit, then into a refuge, and eventually into something even deeper. All they knew in that moment was that it helped. For the first time in a while, something actually helped. That night, when they went to bed, they played the same music softly in the background. They lay down, closed their eyes, and allowed the gentle melody to guide them towards sleep. Their breathing slowed. Their thoughts loosened. The world felt a little less heavy. Slowly, peacefully, they drifted into the kind of deep rest they hadn't experienced in a long time. The next morning, the alarm still rang, but waking up felt slightly easier. Not perfect, not suddenly transformed, but easier. They stretched, took a deep breath, and noticed a small difference inside them. The stress hadn't disappeared, but their mind didn't feel as crowded. They remembered the music from the night before. The softness lingered. They wondered if the calm feeling was just a one-time thing, or if it could happen again. The thoughts stayed with them as they got ready for the day. At work, the usual tasks returned, the noise returned, and the pressure returned. But somewhere inside, they carried a bit of that calm from the night before. It wasn't enough to change everything, but it was enough to give them a moment to breathe. Later that evening, when they returned home after another long and tiring day, they didn't wait for the stress to take over. Instead, they opened the same playlist again and let it play while they changed clothes and washed their face. The piano melody welcomed them like a quiet friend waiting at the door. The music began to form a small space in their life, space that felt safe, quiet, and warm. They didn't understand why it worked, but they didn't question it either. All they knew was that when the music played, something inside them gently unwound. As the days passed, they started to look forward to that moment at night, when they could sit in the dim light and let the soft notes fill the room. It became their way to slow down, to breathe, and to remind themselves that peace was still possible. They didn't know what this quiet journey would become, or how it might change them over time. For now, they were simply grateful for the small discovery that brought a little calm to a restless mind. A soft, simple beginning that felt like the first step toward healing. Even if they didn't realize it yet, the days that followed carried a quiet change. So gentle that the young person almost missed it at first. Life still moved the same weary mornings, long work hours, the usual noise from the street outside, but something small inside them had begun to soften. It was not a big difference, nothing that anyone else would notice, but it was real. It lived quietly in the way they breathed, in the way they walked, in the way they paused before letting stress take over every evening after coming home tired and drained. They would set their phone down, take a slow breath, and play the same classical playlist. It started as a simple habit, a way to unwind, but soon it became the moment they looked forward to the most. The soft piano, the gentle strings, the warm notes, they all felt like parts of a world that existed far away from all the noise, yet close enough to reach. On the third night, they sat on the floor near the window instead of the couch. The sky outside was dark but peaceful. A faint breeze slipped in through a small gap in the window frame, carrying the smell of night air. They closed their eyes as the first melody began, and for a moment, the world around them felt still. The music didn't ask for anything. It didn't rush. It simply filled the space with calm. They found themselves breathing in a slower rhythm, following the rise and fall of the notes. Their mind, usually filled with scattered thoughts, began to settle. Not completely, but enough to let them feel a sense of gentle peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from escaping life. It was more like finding a soft place to rest inside it. Memories returned again, just like the first night. This time, they remembered sitting under a tree during a school picnic many years ago, listening to the soft rustling of leaves while everyone else joked and laughed in the distance. They remembered moments of simple, quiet mornings at home, warm sunlight on their face, the steady sound of rain hitting the windows. These memories didn't come with pain. They came like old friends, visiting for a moment to remind them that peace had existed before and maybe it could exist again. The next day at work felt slightly different. They were still tired, still overwhelmed at times, but the tension didn't grip them as tightly. When small frustrations came, they didn't feel as heavy. When someone spoke to them impatiently, they took a breath instead of reacting quickly. It was as if the calm from the night before stayed with them, shaping their reactions without effort. During lunch break, instead of scrolling through stressful news or checking endless messages, they put on their earphones and played a soft orchestral piece. They sat by a window in the break room, watching cars pass outside, and let the music settle gently inside them. For a few minutes, they forgot the noise of the office around them. They didn't need to escape. They just needed a moment to breathe. When the lunch break ended, they felt lighter. That evening when they came home, they tried something different. Instead of keeping the music only for nighttime, they let it play softly while they cooked a simple meal. The warm notes filled the kitchen, blending with the sound of boiling water and the soft crackle of vegetables in the pan. Somehow, even cooking felt less tiring that day. They found themselves humming along to parts of the melody, though they didn't know the tune. It just felt natural. After dinner, they sat with a journal they hadn't used in months. The pages were untouched, the spine barely bent. They opened it slowly and wrote about their day, not the stressful parts, but the small moments when they felt the calm touch of the music. They wrote about how their breathing changed, how their mind quieted, and how the memories returned gently instead of painfully. They wrote without trying to make it sound pretty. It was just honest, simple, and real. As they wrote, the music continued to play softly in the background. Each note seemed to clear a little more space inside them. They didn't realize how much they needed that space until they finally had it. Another night passed with soft melodies guiding them towards sleep. The rest felt deeper again, not perfect, but noticeably better. They woke up with a sense of quiet strength, a feeling they hadn't experienced in a long time. Over the next few days, their connection with classical music grew naturally. They started exploring new pieces, clicking on suggestions that appeared on their screen. Sometimes it was a gentle violin piece. Other times, it was a slow piano tune that seemed to speak directly to the heart. They didn't understand the technical names or the composers, and they didn't need to. What mattered was how the music made them feel. One evening, after an especially stressful day, they returned home with a tightness in their chest. Work had been loud and fast, full of unexpected issues. Their mind felt cluttered again. But the moment they pressed play on the playlist, the tension began to melt. The opening notes were familiar now, like a soft voice saying, "You're home. You're safe. Breathe." They sat on the couch and let the music guide their thoughts into a calmer place. The tightness in their chest loosened slowly. Their breath became steady once more. They realized something important, that music was not just background noise anymore. It was becoming a companion, one that understood their emotions without them needing to say anything. On a quiet Saturday morning, they decided to take a short walk. They slipped on their shoes, stepped outside, and put on a pair of earphones before starting their playlist. The early sun painted the streets in a soft golden color. Shops were just opening, and the usual rush hadn't begun yet. The neighborhood felt peaceful in a rare and gentle way as they walked. Each melody seemed to give the world around them a softer glow. Trees looked greener, the sky looked clearer, and even the sound of distant traffic felt less harsh. The music seemed to fill the space between their steps. Guiding them forward at a slow and comfortable pace, they walked without a specific destination, simply moving where their feet wanted to go. The music made the walk feel like a small escape, not from the world but into a calmer part of it. The longer they walked, the more they felt connected to the rhythm of their breath, the warmth of the sun, and the quiet inside their mind. After returning home, they felt refreshed in a way they hadn't expected. A short walk with soft music had brought more peace than they had felt in days. They made tea, sat by the window, and let the rest of the playlist play softly while they rested. The morning felt slow and gentle, just the way they liked it. Throughout the week, these little moments became more frequent. Listening to classical music during a break, playing a soft tune while preparing for bed, letting a slow melody carry them through a stressful afternoon. Each time, the music worked like a gentle reminder that peace was still within reach. Friends and coworkers noticed subtle changes in them. They seemed quieter, but in a calm way, not withdrawn. They responded with patience. They smiled more often. They took a moment before reacting to stress. People around them didn't know why, and they didn't ask. But the difference was clear. One evening, after turning off the lights and lying down to sleep, they thought about how this journey had begun almost by accident, just a random click on a playlist. But that small moment had become something meaningful, something steady, something they could rely on. They realized that classical music had done more than calm their mind. It had given them space to breathe, to reflect, and to reconnect with themselves. It helped them remember things they had forgotten, gentle memories, simple comforts, quiet moments. And most importantly, it reminded them that even in a busy, noisy world, they could still create their own calm. As they drifted into sleep that night, they felt grateful for the soft notes that had guided them through the week. They didn't know where this journey would lead next, but they were ready to follow it, step by gentle step. The journey into classical music deepened slowly, almost like a gentle tide coming in without making a sound. What started as a simple way to relax after long days had begun to turn into something meaningful. Something the young person didn't fully understand yet, but they felt it. Each time they pressed play, something inside them opened a little more, as if the music knew how to reach places they had forgotten. One evening, they sat on their bed with the window slightly open, letting a soft breeze move through the room. The city was still noisy outside, with cars and voices echoing between buildings, but inside, the moment felt quiet. They browsed through the music suggestions on their phone and noticed something new: an album with a soft cover image of a violin resting on a wooden table. The title said something about peaceful strings. They had never paid attention to string instruments before, but curiosity nudged them to try. The first notes of the violin were slow and warm, almost like a gentle whisper finding its way into their thoughts. The sound didn't rush. It didn't push. It simply drifted in, soft and steady. They closed their eyes without meaning to and let themselves sink into the melody. The violin seemed to speak without words, carrying emotions they didn't know how to express. It touched something deep inside, something tender. A memory surfaced, one they hadn't thought of in years. They remembered sitting in a school auditorium during a cultural event. Someone had played a simple tune on a violin, and even as a child, they remembered feeling something shift in their chest. It wasn't sadness, and it wasn't joy. It was something in between, something warm and emotional. Listening now, they realized they were feeling that same emotion again. They didn't know why. But the music made them want to breathe differently, speak differently, live differently. It made them feel connected to a part of themselves that had been silent for too long. When the piece ended, they opened their eyes slowly, as if waking from a soft dream. The next few days, they explored more string pieces. Some were slow and soothing, others were slightly more emotional, but each one seemed to reveal something new. It was strange how music could make the heart understand things the mind couldn't explain. They found comfort in that. They didn't need to understand everything. They just needed to feel. One afternoon, while walking home from work, they decided to take the long route instead of the usual quick path. They put on their earphones, started their playlist, and let the music guide their steps. The sky above was covered in soft gray clouds, and the air carried the smell of rain. The slow violin melody felt perfectly matched with the quiet atmosphere around them as they walked. They noticed things they usually missed: the gentle movement of tree branches, the distant sound of children laughing, the warm light coming from small shop windows. Everything looked softer, calmer. It was as if the music gave the world a different color. They passed by a small bakery. The warm smell of freshly baked bread mixed with the soft notes in their ears. Something about that moment made them smile gently. It felt simple, yet meaningful. It reminded them that even ordinary days could carry little pieces of beauty. When they reached a quiet corner of the street, a delicate piano piece began to play. The melody was simple, but it had a depth that made their chest feel lighter. They stopped walking for a moment and leaned against a wall, just listening. People moved around them. Cars passed by. The world continued its noise. But inside that moment, all they felt was calm. They took a deep breath, realizing how much the music had changed the way they saw the world. It wasn't that life had become easier. Work was still stressful. Responsibilities still waited for them. But somewhere inside, they had found something strong and quiet, like a lantern glowing in a dark room. Over the next week, they began exploring different composers. They didn't care about names or history. They only cared about how each piece made them feel. Some music lifted their mood instantly with bright piano notes. Other pieces slowed down their thoughts and made them reflect. Sometimes they even felt tears in their eyes, not from sadness, but from a deep emotional release they had never allowed themselves to feel before. They began to understand something important. Classical music wasn't just background sound. It was a language, a quiet, emotional language that spoke directly to the heart. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, they came home feeling drained. The office had been chaotic, and their mind felt heavy again. They didn't even change out of their work clothes. They simply placed their bag aside, sat on the floor, and started a new playlist. The first piece was a piano solo. The opening notes were slow, like footsteps on soft ground. As the melody unfolded, something inside them loosened. They closed their eyes, placed their hands over their knees, and breathed slowly. The piano moved gently, guiding their thoughts into a calmer rhythm. This time, instead of memories, something else surfaced a realization. They had been carrying so many thoughts, so many expectations, so many unspoken emotions. They had been running through life without pausing. And now, through this soft music, they were finally learning to pause. Their eyes stayed closed as the piece continued. Every rise in the melody felt like a soft wave passing through them. Every quiet moment between the notes felt like a small space to breathe. When the music ended, they opened their eyes slowly. The world looked the same, but they didn't feel the same. That night, they wrote in their journal again. This time, they wrote about the way music had changed them, not in big dramatic ways, but in quiet, steady ones. They wrote about the walks, the moments of calm, the memories that resurfaced gently, the way their reactions toward stress were becoming softer. They wrote about how music made them feel less alone with their thoughts. It felt like someone was speaking to them without using words, reminding them that emotions were natural, that healing didn't need to be loud, and that finding peace could begin with something as simple as a single note. A few days later, they decided to look up whether there were any local events involving classical music. They didn't expect much, but to their surprise, they found out that a small community center nearby was hosting a weekend performance by a group of young musicians. It wasn't a big concert or anything fancy, just a simple gathering where people could enjoy live music. Their first instinct was to ignore it. They weren't the type to attend events alone. They felt nervous just thinking about sitting in a room full of strangers. But something inside them kept returning to the idea. Maybe hearing the music live would bring a different experience, a deeper connection. By the time the weekend arrived, they were still unsure. But instead of overthinking, they got dressed, put on their shoes, and stepped outside. Something inside them said, just go. See what happens? When they reached the community center, they were welcomed by a warm atmosphere. The room was small and simple, with a few rows of chairs facing a tiny stage. People of different ages filled the room, some alone, some with family, some just curious like them. The musicians were setting up, tuning their instruments with gentle sounds. They found a seat near the middle and sat quietly, feeling their heartbeat quicken. When the lights dimmed slightly and the performance began, they felt a wave of emotion rise inside them. The first piece was played by a small group, 2 violins, a cello, and a piano. The harmonies were soft, yet full and rich. The sound filled the entire room, wrapping every listener in warm layers of music. Hearing it live felt completely different from listening through earphones. They felt each note in their chest, each pause, each breath the musicians took. The young person felt something shift inside them, something they couldn't describe. It wasn't dramatic or overwhelming. It was simply deep, real, human. As the music continued, he realized that this journey wasn't just about relaxation anymore. It was becoming a way of understanding themselves, of reconnecting with emotions they had ignored for years. The music didn't take away their stress or solve their problems, but it gave them strength to face them. When the performance ended, the audience clapped softly, and the room buzzed with gentle conversation. They remained seated for a moment, letting the feelings settle inside them. Walking home that evening, they felt a quiet joy they hadn't felt in a long time. Not loud joy, not excitement, just a soft, warm feeling that made their steps lighter. They looked up at the night sky, where a few stars peeked through the city lights, and they smiled to themselves. This journey, which began with a single click on a playlist, had become something deeper, something healing, and they were ready for wherever the music would take them next. The days that followed moved in a soft rhythm, almost like the gentle notes that had once calmed him on that long ride home. He didn't fully understand why the music had affected him so deeply that day, but he knew something inside him wanted to explore it more. He woke up the next morning with the same curiosity sitting quietly in his chest, and instead of brushing it away, he let it stay. He allowed it to guide his steps as he went about his daily routine. The morning sunlight came in through the thin curtains of his small room, painting faint lines across the floor. He sat up slowly, listening to the muffled sounds of the neighborhood waking up. Usually, his mind felt heavy as soon as he opened his eyes, filled with unfinished tasks and worries waiting to jump in. But this time, he noticed a strange calmness. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was almost like a breeze touching the edges of his thoughts. Reminding him to take things one moment at a time, he reached for his phone. The same way he did every morning, but instead of scrolling through messages or news, he opened the same playlist he had discovered on that bus. The music started softly, as if greeting him in a familiar voice. The first note drifted through the room, warm and steady. He closed his eyes for a moment and breathed in slowly. It felt like the day had paused just long enough for him to gather himself. After getting ready, he stepped outside and started walking to the place he worked. The streets were busy, but instead of letting the noise drown him the way it always did, he kept one earbud in, letting the calm notes accompany him like an old friend. The people around him moved quickly, cars passed, conversations floated in the air, but he didn't feel overwhelmed. The music helped him move with more ease, almost as if his steps were syncing with each gentle piano note. When he reached work, he tried to carry that same sense of calm with him. It wasn't easy. There were moments when stress returned in sharp waves, especially when tasks piled up or when someone called his name from across the room. But each time he felt himself slipping into old patterns, he remembered the music. During his short breaks, he would step aside, put the earbud back in, and let the melody steady him. People around him didn't notice much difference, but inside, something had shifted. That afternoon, while sorting through a stack of papers, he paused and stared out the window. The sky was a pale blue, a few clouds drifting slowly across it. For years, he had walked through days without really noticing the sky at all. He had been so focused on getting through responsibilities that he rarely stopped to breathe, to notice, to be present. Now, with the music playing low in the background, he found himself appreciating small things, the way sunlight landed on rooftops, the soft rustling of leaves, the distant laughter of children on the street. He wondered if this quiet appreciation had always been available, if he had simply been too overwhelmed to feel it. Maybe everyone had moments like this, hidden in plain sight, waiting to be noticed. He took a long breath, feeling grateful for the unexpected shift the music had brought into his days. By evening, when he stepped out of work and began walking home, the tiredness in his body felt different. Instead of feeling drained, he felt the same kind of tiredness one feels after a meaningful day. He walked slowly, not rushing, letting the air brush against his face. Without thinking much, he replayed some of the pieces he had listened to earlier. It amazed him how the same song could feel different depending on the moment. On the bus, it had been a lifeline. In the morning, it was a gentle welcome. During work, it was a reminder to stay calm. Now, during his walk home, it felt like a companion walking next to him as he entered his neighborhood. He noticed an older man sitting outside on a wooden chair, enjoying the evening breeze. The man glanced up, and they exchanged a simple nod, the kind that carried quiet respect even between strangers. He realized that even this small moment felt softer than usual. Maybe he was slowing down enough to actually see people now. When he reached home, he changed into comfortable clothes and sat down by the window with a cup of warm tea. The smell rose gently, and for once, he didn't rush to finish it. He held the cup in both hands, feeling the warmth seep into his palms. He put on another piece of classical music, and soon his room filled with a soft, slow melody that moved like a river. He let himself sink into the moment. As the evening deepened, he began journaling, a habit he had abandoned years ago. He wrote with simple words, not worrying about perfect sentences. He wrote about the bus ride, the unexpected calm, the small changes he had noticed in himself since then. He wrote about his thoughts, about how strange it felt to experience peace after such long stretches of noise. He didn't write for anyone else. He wrote to understand himself again. That night, he slept earlier than usual. The music continued playing softly as he drifted off, like a gentle promise that tomorrow could be just as calm. Over the next few days, he became more intentional with his time. He made small adjustments in his routines, picking moments to pause and breathe. Classical music became a part of his mornings, his breaks, his nights. He didn't treat it like a solution to all his problems. He just let it be a quiet companion that helped him to make sense of things. One afternoon, he decided to take a walk to a nearby park, something he hadn't done in months. The weather was mild, with a soft breeze passing through the trees. As he walked along the narrow path, he noticed the sound of leaves crunching softly under his shoes. He slowed down, something he rarely did without a reason. He found an empty bench and sat down, watching people pass by, parents holding small children, young people chatting, someone jogging with steady steps. He removed his earbuds for a moment and listened to the natural sounds of the world around him. It wasn't silent, but it wasn't overwhelming either. It was just life happening at its own pace. After a while, he put the music back on and let the melody blend with the environment. The mixture of soft piano notes and distant laughter felt peaceful. For the first time in a long while, he felt connected to the world rather than lost in it. As the sun began to lower, he stood up and continued walking. He didn't feel rushed to get anywhere. Everything felt lighter. He realized he had always been searching for some big moment that would change his life, never imagining that something as simple as a piece of music could begin that change. Later that evening, he decided to cook something warm for himself. Instead of hurrying through the process like he always did, he cooked slowly, taking time to smell the spices, to hear the gentle bubbling of the pot, to feel grateful for the small comfort of a home-cooked meal. With the music playing softly in the background, the kitchen felt warm and familiar. When he finally sat down to eat, he felt present. He savored each bite. After dinner, he spent a little time reading. Not because he felt he had to, but because he wanted to. He picked a simple book, the kind that told stories of people finding meaning in everyday moments. The stories didn't have dramatic twists or loud emotions. They were quiet, relatable, real. He found himself soaking in every chapter. Before sleeping, he sat by his window again, looking at the night sky. The stars were faint, but they were there, scattered like little sparks. He listened to a slow, gentle orchestra piece, letting the notes drift through the dark room. The day had been simple, but it felt full. He closed his eyes and thought about the journey he had unknowingly begun. He didn't know where it would lead or how much it would change him, but he felt ready to keep going, one calm moment at a time. He no longer felt like he was running through his days. He felt like he was finally living them. And as he drifted off to sleep, he held on to the quiet truth that had been growing inside him sometimes. Peace doesn't come from big changes. Sometimes it starts with a single moment, a single note, a single breath. And if you let it, it grows, surprising you in the most gentle ways. The next few weeks moved quietly, but they carried a different kind of weight. Not the heavy weight that pushes a person down, but the soft kind that makes them slow down and notice life with calmer eyes. The person had settled into a new rhythm without even planning it. Their nights were gentler now, their mornings lighter, and their thoughts were finally learning how to walk instead of run. Yet life has a way of testing any peace we find, just to see if it is real or temporary. One late afternoon, something happened at work that shook them unexpectedly. It was not dramatic or dangerous, but it was the sort of moment that catches a person when they are already tired. A misunderstanding between two coworkers turned into a small argument, and somehow they were pulled into the middle of it. Voices rose, mistakes were thrown around, and the blame slid across the room until it landed right on their shoulders. Their chests tightened. For a moment, it felt like the old days, the rushing heartbeat, the sweaty palms, the thought that maybe they were failing again. But then something different happened. Instead of reacting or panicking, they quietly excused themselves and stepped outside for a few minutes. The cool air touched their face, and the first thing they did was reach for their earphones. A soft piano piece started playing, one they had listened to many times before. The notes fell gently, like slow rain softening dry soil. Their breathing eased. Their mind, which had been tightening like a rope, slowly loosened. In those few minutes, they felt something settle inside them. For the first time, they realized they were learning to heal not by running away from stress, but by meeting it with something calm. They returned to the office with steady steps, spoke clearly, explained the misunderstanding. The entire situation resolved without further tension. Even they were surprised by how calmly they handled it. When they went home that evening, they sat on the floor near their window. The sun was setting, and the room looked warm and peaceful. They replayed the moment in their head, not with fear, but with gratitude. They had found something that protected their heart in ways they never expected. They had always thought music was just background noise, something to fill silence. Now they understood that it was much more. It was a kind of medicine. It's a soft bridge between chaos and clarity. A few days later, they decided to explore more deeply. They wanted to understand why classical music affected them so strongly. They searched online, read small articles about how different instruments create different emotions, and listened to samples while reading. They learned that string instruments often carry sadness or deep reflection, while piano pieces create focus, and orchestral sounds can feel like they are telling stories larger than life. It made sense because each time they listened to a new piece, they felt something unique. One night, they came across a playlist titled something like Healing Through Strings. They pressed play without thinking much. The first piece started gently, almost whisper-like, and within seconds, they felt the weight of old emotions rising. Not in a painful way, but in a way that felt freeing. They lay down with their eyes closed as the music washed over them. Memories came, moments they never talked about, small hurts they had ignored, and feelings they had pushed aside. The music didn't judge them or rush them. It simply gave them space. The next morning, they woke up feeling lighter than usual. It was strange how something as simple as a melody could make room inside the heart that had been blocked for years. They realized they were not only calming their mind, they were healing their heart little by little. During this time, friends and family began noticing changes. Someone told them their voice sounded more relaxed, as if they were carrying less tension. Another said they seemed more patient now. A close friend even asked what they had been doing differently. They just smiled and said they were taking time to find peace. It felt too personal to fully explain, but they hoped people could feel the quietness they were trying to build. One evening, their friend invited them to a small classical concert in the city. At first, they hesitated. They had never been to a live performance before. The idea of sitting in a concert hall surrounded by strangers made them nervous. But something inside them said to go. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the desire to experience music in its purest form. The night of the concert arrived. The hall was simple, not very large, and the audience was calm. People spoke softly, as if they already understood the power of silence. When they took their seat, they felt a small flutter in their chest, a mix of excitement and nervousness. The lights dimmed and the musicians walked quietly onto the stage. No big introduction, no loud applause, just gentle appreciation. When the first note was played, everything else disappeared. It felt different from listening through earphones. The music wasn't coming from a device, it was alive. They could feel the vibration, the emotion, the way the instruments breathed together. Each sound filled the hall and touched their chest like a soft wave. They didn't know much about the piece being played, but they didn't need to. It felt like the music was speaking directly to the parts of them they never knew how to express. They felt warmth behind their eyes, a small sting of emotion they tried to hide, but they didn't look away. No one judged them. Everyone around them was lost in the same quiet place. Halfway through the concert, they noticed something strange. They were not thinking about work stirs, or the incident that had shaken them earlier that week. They were just present fully, softly, peacefully present. It was a feeling they had not experienced in years. A violin solo began. The sound was so gentle that it almost felt like someone placing a warm hand on their shoulder. It reminded them that healing doesn't have to be loud. It can be soft, slow, steady, like a quiet river smoothing stones over time. By the end of the concert, they didn't want to leave. They wished the music could continue a little longer. But as they walked outside, they realized the calm they felt was not temporary. Something had shifted inside them. The music had reached a part of their heart that had been locked away for too long. The night air was cool, and the city lights looked softer than usual. They walked slowly, not in a hurry to reach home. Their thoughts were peaceful, their body relaxed, and their heart steady. It was as if the music had written something new inside them, a message that said it was okay to feel, okay to pause, okay to breathe. For the first time in a long time, they felt connected to themselves, to life, and to the world around them. Over the next few days, they found themselves replaying the concert in their mind. Not just the sounds, but the feeling of being there. The way the hall felt warm and safe. The way the notes felt like gentle footsteps guiding them somewhere quiet. They realized they wanted more moments like that. They began searching for upcoming concerts, small gatherings, or even community events where people played classical music. They didn't care if the performers were professionals or students. They just wanted to feel that sense of calm again. The more they listened, the more they changed. They no longer reacted quickly to stress. They paused, took a breath, and let music help steady them. They no longer carried old pain the same way. They had learned to release it through melodies that understood their feelings better than words ever could. Their heart felt softer now, not weak, but gently open. They learned that strength was not in hiding emotions, but in being able to sit with them without fear. They learned that peace was not something distant, it was something they could create every day. It's one note at a time. And so, their journey deepened, not through sudden miracles, but through small, quiet moments of connection with the music that slowly helped heal their life. Life slowly settled into a gentle shape that felt new but familiar at the same time. The person had lived many years without noticing the softness that could exist inside a single moment. Now their days carried a different rhythm, one shaped by calm choices and quiet reflections. It wasn't a perfect life, and stress still appeared from time to time, but there was something inside them that didn't shake so easily anymore. It was as if a steady light had been lit inside their chest, guiding them through the uneven days. Each morning began with soft music. Before checking their phone or stepping into the rush of the day, they played a calming melody. Sometimes it was just a simple piano piece, other times a slow orchestral tune that felt like gentle waves rolling in and out. They sat on the edge of their bed or near the window and let the sound enter their thoughts before anything else had a chance to steal their peace. It became a small ritual, something that grounded them. At work, they noticed that they moved differently. They listened more, spoke more thoughtfully, and didn't allow small problems to overwhelm them as easily as before. When something stressful happened, instead of letting their mind run wild, they took a moment to breathe. They would quietly step aside, whisper to themselves that everything was okay, and sometimes even play a short piece of music on low volume. These small pauses made a big difference. People around them felt the change too. Something else changed as well, the way they carried themselves around others. They weren't forcing calmness. It was simply growing naturally. Few coworkers mentioned that they seemed more centered, as if their thoughts were clearer. Some even asked for music recommendations. curious about what had brought such peaceful energy. The person shared a few playlists, but didn't try to explain the whole journey. Some feelings are too personal, too deep to explain in simple words. Evenings were their favorite time. They would go for slow walks with their earphones in, letting the night breeze touch their face while listening to gentle pieces. The world looked different when viewed through sound. Streetlights looked softer. Footsteps sounded more rhythmic, and even the quiet hum of the city felt like part of a bigger harmony. They began noticing things they had always ignored: trees swaying lightly, the distant sound of a bus passing, the way shadows shifted across the pavement. Calmness made room for new details. On some nights they sat in their room with the lights dimmed. They would play a long playlist and let their mind drift without forcing any thoughts. It was their way of unwinding, releasing the tension that had built up during the day. Sometimes they wrote in their journals small notes about their feelings, what they discovered, or what they hoped for. The words didn't have to be perfect. They just needed to be honest. One evening, while sitting quietly and listening to a soft violin piece, they realized how far they had come. A year ago, their mind felt heavy, restless, and crowded. Peace seemed like something distant and unreachable, but now they could feel calm even in simple moments. They could find stillness even in the middle of noise. They felt proud of themselves, not because they became perfect, but because they kept trying. Their heart had changed too. It felt less guarded and more open to emotions. They had learned to let themselves feel without fear. When sadness came, they didn't push it away. When joy arrived, they embraced it fully. Music had taught them that emotions weren't enemies. They were signals, reminders that they were human. One weekend, they decided to revisit the small concert hall where they had their first live classical experience. This time, they went without hesitation. The hall felt familiar now, like a place where their heart had once been held gently. They took a seat near the middle, feeling a quiet excitement building. When the musicians began playing, the person closed their eyes and let the sound carry them. The music felt deeper this time. Maybe it was because they were listening with a heart that had learned to stay open. Or maybe it was because they understood themselves more now. They didn't need to escape anything, they simply wanted to be present. They felt a warmth in their chest, the kind that comes when a person knows they are exactly where they need to be. Throughout the performance, they remembered small moments from the past year. The first night, they clicked on the classical playlist, the quiet walks, the stressful work moment that they handled calmly, the journal entries, the nights when music helped them breathe again. All those small steps added up to something meaningful. When the concert ended, they stayed seated for a moment. People around them began leaving, talking softly as they walked out. But the person wanted to stay in the feeling for just a little longer. They took a slow breath and let the final notes echo inside them. Walking outside, they realized something important. Music had not changed their life all at once. It had changed their life through small, consistent moments, gentle habits that shaped their days. It taught them how to pause, how to listen, how to be patient with themselves. In the following weeks, they continued building their routines. They curated playlists for different moods, one for mornings, one for thinking, one for relaxing, and one for sleeping. They even created a special playlist titled something like Calm My Heart, filled with pieces that carried personal meaning at home. They started lighting a small candle during their evening listening sessions. The soft glow mixed with the gentle sounds created a peaceful space that felt like a small sanctuary. They didn't need fancy things, just music, quiet, and a few minutes of stillness. Their relationships improved too. They were more patient with their family, more understanding with friends, and more open about their feelings. People felt safe, sharing their struggles with them because they knew the person would listen without judgment. Calmness had made them kinder, not only to themselves, but to others. One afternoon, while sitting on a bench in a nearby park, the person watched children playing and families walking. Birds scattered across the sky as a soft melody played in their ears. In that moment, they felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the music, for the journey, for the chance to rebuild their life in a gentle way. They realized that peace wasn't something they found by accident. It was something they created intentionally, piece by piece. and they could continue creating it for as long as they wanted. Their nights were no longer filled with anxiety. Their mornings were no longer rushed with chaos. The music became a guide, a quiet friend, a reminder that even in a loud world, a soft heart can survive. One day, while reflecting on everything, they whispered to themselves a simple truth. I'm finally learning how to live quietly inside a noisy world. They smiled, knowing that this journey wasn't ending. It was simply becoming a natural part of their life. Classical music had not only calmed their mind, it had softened their heart, cleared their thoughts, and reminded them of the beauty hidden in ordinary moments. With each new day, they promised themselves one thing. No matter how busy life becomes, they will always return to the melodies that taught them how to breathe again.